Your new name is Alexei Volkov. You've repeated it in the mirror every morning for 6 weeks, and it still sounds like a stranger's obituary. You're 28 years old, a DEA agent, and you've just committed to 6 months of living a lie so convincing that even you might start believing it. The briefing file sits on your kitchen counter in your actual apartment, the one you'll never see again after tonight. Inside are 3 driver's licenses, 2 credit cards with transaction histories you didn't make, a cell phone with contacts you've never met, and a backstory so detailed it includes the name of your fictional childhood dog. His name was Boris. He died when you were 12. You've been told to remember this because criminals ask about dead pets. It's a trust test. You pass the test or you disappear into the East River wearing concrete Nikes. Brighton Beach isn't what civilians picture when they think Brooklyn. It's not brownstones and artisan coffee shops. It's Cyrillic signs on every storefront, Georgian restaurants where the menu has no English translation, and men in tracksuits who conduct business on boardwalk benches like they're running a Fortune 500 company, which, in a sense, they are. The Russian organised crime syndicate operating here moves an estimated $2 billion annually through narcotics, extortion, money laundering, and a dozen other revenue streams that don't appear on tax returns. Your job is to document it, every transaction, every name, every location, then testify about it in federal court while sitting behind bulletproof glass because the Bratva has a long memory and an international reach. The legend they built for you is a work of art. Alexei Volkov, born in Odessa, immigrated at 15, grew up in South Brooklyn. You've got a juvenile record that's been artificially inserted into the system. Petty theft, assault, nothing major but enough to establish you're not a civilian. You did 2 years in a medium security facility upstate, except you didn't. But the paperwork says otherwise, and paperwork is the only scripture criminals believe in. Your cellmate during that fictional stint was Dmitry Kovalenko, who upon release became a mid-level enforcer for the Sokolov crew. Dmitry is real. The friendship is manufactured. He thinks you saved his life during a prison yard incident that never happened. Memory is malleable when the story is useful. You meet Dmitry at a dumpling house on Brighton Beach Avenue. He's heavier than his file photo, softer around the edges in a way that suggests he's moved up from muscle work to management. He embraces you like a brother, kisses both cheeks, orders in Russian without asking what you want. The dumplings arrive, you eat, you laugh at his jokes, you ask about his family, you do not ask about his work because asking is what outsiders do. People on the inside already know, or they wait to be told. 3 weeks in, you're still on the periphery. You run errands, you deliver packages you're not supposed to open, you drive people to meetings you're not invited to attend. This is the probation period, the organisational hazing ritual, where they determine if you're useful, loyal, or law enforcement. One mistake and you're not fired, you're erased. The fear of discovery isn't abstract. It's a physical sensation that lives in your chest 24 hours a day, a tightness that makes breathing feel like a manual task you have to remember to perform. Your handler is a woman named Torres. You meet her once a week in rotating locations, parking garages, public libraries, once in the reptile house at the Bronx Zoo because no one bugs conversations next to a 12-foot python. She asks how you're holding up. You tell her you're fine. This is a lie. You're not fine. You're starting to think in Russian. You're starting to prefer vodka to bourbon. You're starting to understand why 17% of undercover officers report extreme personal changes after operations end. The person you're pretending to be is easier to inhabit than the person you actually are, and that realization should terrify you, but mostly, it just feels like relief. The breakthrough comes during a poker game in a basement on Coney Island Avenue. High stakes, invitation only, the kind of game where you pay your buy-in in cash and leave your phone in a bucket by the door. You're there because Dmitry vouched for you, and vouching in this world is a blood contract. If you're law enforcement, he dies alongside you. The Pecan himself is 3 seats to your left. You don't look at him directly. Looking at authority figures without permission is a sign of disrespect or ambition, and both get you killed. He's 70 years old, wears a cardigan like someone's grandfather, and has personally ordered at least 40 executions. You know this because the DEA has been building a file on him since the 90s. He knows you exist because Dmitry told him about the prison yard incident that never happened. You lose deliberately, not too much but enough to seem human. Winners attract attention. Moderate losers blend into the furniture. Between hands, you absorb everything, who sits where, who defers to whom. The Brigadier, to your right, runs the drug distribution network. The man checking his watch every 10 minutes handles the money laundering operation through a chain of legitimate businesses that exist solely on paper. The quiet one in the corner with the scar tissue on his knuckles is an enforcer, the kind who makes problems disappear in ways that don't generate missing persons reports. 4 months into the operation, you've been accepted. Not trusted. Acceptance and trust are different currencies here. But you're inside the room when decisions get made. You've witnessed transactions, you've met suppliers, you've stood next to people while they discuss things that will eventually become RICO predicates. Your recordings are pristine, your reports are detailed. Your handler says you're building the strongest case against a Russian organized crime syndicate since the Feinberg takedown in '97. You should feel proud. Instead, you feel like you're watching yourself from outside your body, a spectator to your own performance. The problem with living a lie is that the lie starts living you. The erosion happens so gradually you don't notice until you're standing in your apartment. The real one in Queens that nobody from Brighton Beach knows exists, and you realize you've been speaking Russian to yourself while making coffee. You're 6 months in. That's the shelf life according to operational doctrine. After 6 months, agents either get extracted or they don't come back at all. Torres knows this. You know she knows, but the case is too valuable to close now. The Pecan trusts Dmitri. Dmitri trusts you. That trust is a bridge connecting federal prosecutors to 40 years of untouchable criminal enterprise. Nobody says it explicitly, but the message arrives through careful silence. You're staying in. The moral injury starts small. You watch Dmitri collect a debt from a restaurant owner in Sheepshead Bay. The man is 3 weeks late on a protection payment. Dmitri doesn't touch him, doesn't need to. He just sits across from the owner, drinks tea, and explains in that conversational tone how restaurant kitchens are such fire hazards. Grease build-up, faulty wiring, so many things that could go wrong. The owner pays the next morning. You document the extortion with a recording device hidden in your jacket lining and you tell yourself you're doing your job. But you're also doing nothing while a terrified man hands over money he doesn't have to criminals who don't need it. Witnessing isn't the same as participating, except morally it lands in the same neighborhood. 3 weeks later, you're in the car when they break a loan shark victim's hand. Not all of it, just 2 fingers. Precision violence. You're there because Dmitri wanted company on the drive, and saying no would have required an explanation you can't provide. The sound of bones breaking is something you thought movies exaggerated. They don't. You file the report. You include details that will help prosecutors establish a pattern of physical intimidation. You don't include the part where you threw up in a gas station bathroom 20 minutes later. The depersonalization arrives like weather. Aspects of your cover identity start bleeding into your actual personality. You prefer your fake name now. It feels more real than the one on your birth certificate. You catch yourself responding to it even when you're alone. Your actual memories start feeling distant, like they happened to someone else. The childhood in Ohio, the academy training, the girlfriend who left because you couldn't explain why you were never available. All of it belongs to a person you used to be. The person you are now drinks with criminals, laughs at their jokes, and has stopped flinching when they discuss violence like other people discuss weather patterns. Torres notices during a meeting in a library parking lot in Staten Island. She asks if you're maintaining boundaries. You tell her yes. She looks at you the way doctors look at patients who insist the lump is nothing. She doesn't push. She just slides a number across the table, a psychologist who specializes in undercover operations, and suggests you might want to talk to someone when this ends. When, not if. You appreciate the optimism even though both of you understand the statistics. The collapse begins with something absurdly small. A phone number. You're at Dimitri's social club, the legitimate business front that serves as an operational headquarters. The Pecan is meeting with a brigadier from Philadelphia. You're in the back room, ostensibly helping Dmitri with paperwork, actually recording everything through the device that looks like a pen but cost the DEA $12,000. The brigadier mentions a shipment, 500 kilos moving through Port Newark next month, and he reads a phone number off a piece of paper. A burner, obviously. The number for coordinating the logistics. You memorize it. 10 digits. You've memorized hundreds of pieces of information over 6 months. This one shouldn't be different, except when you meet Torres 2 days later, the number is gone. Not forgotten. Gone. Like it never existed in your memory at all. You search your recordings. The conversation is there, but the brigadier spoke too quietly, and the number is inaudible under ambient noise. 500 kilos of heroin, and the critical piece of intelligence has evaporated from your brain like morning fog. Torres sees your face and understands immediately. She doesn't say anything. She doesn't need to. You both know what this means. Your mind is protecting itself by deleting information it can't process. The psychological term is dissociative amnesia. The operational term is you're done. But you're not done because the takedown is scheduled for 3 weeks out. The entire operation hinges on one final transaction, a meeting where the Pecan will personally oversee a payment to a corrupt customs official. That meeting puts him in the same room as the conspiracy, on tape, with no plausible deniability. It's the capstone of a RICO case that will dismantle an organization operating since the Soviet Union collapsed. 3 more weeks. Torres pulls you after 18 days. Not because of the memory gap, because Dmitri asks you a question you can't answer. He's driving you back from a collection in Bensonhurst, and out of nowhere he asks what prison you served time in. You've told this story a dozen times. The legend is backstopped, documented, verified. You can recite every detail, except in that moment sitting in Dimitri's car with Brighton Beach passing outside the window, you can't remember the name. Your mind offers nothing, just blank space where critical information should live. You stall, make a joke about trying to forget that part of your life. Dmitri laughs, but something shifts behind his eyes. A calculation. A question mark where certainty used to be. You call Torres from a bodega payphone. You use the emergency protocol. She extracts you 6 hours later through a staged arrest outside a restaurant in Gravesend. You're cuffed, processed, and disappeared into witness protection before Dmitri can verify whether the arrest was real. The Pecan walks free. The case collapses without the final piece of evidence. 40 years of criminal enterprise continues operating because your brain couldn't hold a phone number and a prison name simultaneously. You traded your identity for nothing. 6 months after extraction, you're living in Boise under a name that isn't Alexei, and isn't the one your parents gave you either. You work at a sporting goods store. You help customers choose fishing rods. Sometimes someone speaks Russian in the checkout line and your spine goes rigid before you remember that not everyone speaking Russian is connected to the Bratva. Your actual handler, not Torres, she got reassigned, sends quarterly check-ins. You're supposed to report any contact from your previous life. There hasn't been any. There won't be. You didn't betray them. You just disappeared. In their world, that happens. People vanish into the system, into witness protection, into shallow graves in New Jersey. The ambiguity is what keeps you alive. The therapist asks if you regret it. The operation, the sacrifice, the 6 months of becoming someone else so completely that you can't fully return. You tell her you don't know. That's the most honest answer you have. You documented crimes. You gathered evidence. None of it resulted in prosecutions, but it exists in a file somewhere. Waiting. Maybe it connects to something else. Maybe it matters eventually. Or maybe you just spent half a year dissolving yourself for a case that died the moment your memory failed. What you don't tell the therapist is that sometimes, late at night, you miss it. Not the fear or the violence or the moral injury. You miss the clarity. When you were Alexei, every action had purpose. Every conversation mattered. You were building something, even if that something was your own psychological demolition. Now you sell fishing rods in Idaho and nothing you do means anything beyond the transaction. You're safe. You're alive. You're so profoundly bored that you understand, finally, why 17% of undercover officers report extreme personal changes. It's not that the work changed them. It's that they can't figure out how to be anyone else afterward. The person you were before Brighton Beach no longer exists. The person you pretended to be was never real. What's left is something in between. A man with 3 names and no idea which one actually belongs to him. You're not a hero. You're not a tragedy. You're just someone who went undercover and discovered the only thing more dangerous than being discovered by criminals is discovering you were never quite sure who you were to begin with.